Welcome to the NACE Town Hall, Life After COVID-19, the New Reality. Today's session is being brought to you by HireVue. HireVue is a global leader in video interviewing and interview assessments. Their enterprise-grade platform provides a faster and equitable way to evaluate talent. HireVue supports over 1 million graduate interviews annually and has solutions for campus teams. HireVue has hosted almost 15 million interviews for its over 700 plus customers. It is my pleasure to turn the session over to today's moderator and NACE Executive Director, Sean Vanderzeel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Town Hall. We're so pleased that you are able to join us today. This is the fourth Town Hall that we've done in consecutive weeks, and we have one more Town Hall to go, which will be next week. We have a great group of panelists. I think you're really going to enjoy today's conversation. Before we get into the conversation, I want to do a couple of things. So let me explain the order and how we're going to go through today's program so you know how to interact with us and how the Town Hall will run. I'm going to start out by providing all of us with some knowledge, give everyone a base of information of where we are today, and that knowledge is going to come from our most recent quick poll that we've been doing for both colleges and employers. I'll give you the most up-to-date statistics that we have, and then I'll turn to the panelists, and the panelists will answer some general questions. Once we are through with that section, which probably will be about 20 minutes, we are going to turn it over to you all in the audience for questions based upon the commentary that our panelists have given. So we'll be interacting with you through Zoom. We can't hear or see you, but we can interact with you by you using the Q&A feature when you have a question, or the chat feature where you can also interact with each other or provide commentary if you'd like to. So we'll be monitoring that throughout the session, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. We won't be able to get to everything, but we'll certainly give it our best try as we go through this. Today's session is, we have it listed as the new reality, but what we're really trying to get at is, over the last several weeks, all of us have been really focused on the here and now, just trying to catch up with the world and make sense of the world and where we're at. And we thought we would take one step forward today with our panelists once we get to that conversation. And that step is going to be, how are we planning? And what are the things we're thinking through to get us to the next step? So what are we thinking about come the summer months and the planning we're going to do during the summer? And then what are we thinking about that execution for the fall and where we might be based upon a number of different scenarios? So we wanted to just advance our knowledge a little bit and our thinking through today's session. Before we get there, let me cover some statistics. So we've been doing a quick poll. These are updated every single Friday on the NACE Web website. You can go to the coronavirus resources page and you'll see the most up-to-date statistics. They're updated on Fridays. But the statistics I'm going to give you today are actually based upon the most recent ones. They're not up on the website yet. They're as of this morning. So basically, with our colleges, and we have about 600 colleges who have responded so far to this. Almost everybody is virtual at this point, which is no surprise. And of our college and university partners, most are doing most services that they would do in the office, from general counseling, job search advice, resume reviews. That's pretty universal in terms of the number of schools that are actually doing those services, close to the 100% mark. So anywhere between the 93 to 99% mark. Career workshops, about 73% of career centers are doing career workshops, and about 53% are doing testing right now. So like the Myers-Briggs and Strong, that kind of testing. When we ask the question around career fairs for the fall, this is more of an advanced planning stage. 43% of our colleges are still saying that, yes, they're planning to hold career fairs and do them as on-campus events. So that's 43% right now. 7% have said virtual events. That's what they're planning for. And then 31% have said that they're going to do both virtual and on campus. And 17% have said no career fairs at all in the fall. When we look at facilitating recruiting interviews for employers, this is also interesting. We have 5.7%, almost 6%, who have said yes, they're going to facilitate interviews as usual on campus. 28.8% have said that they're going to do interviews with employers via virtual platforms. So that was 28.8% on virtual platforms. And 45.6% have said they're going to do a combination of on-campus and virtual. So they're going to do a combo. Now I'd like to give you a little bit of information about the employers, and we have, I believe, about 350 employers that have responded to this so far. These questions, the answers to these have been changing over time, so it's been interesting to track what employers are thinking and they're doing. When we ask the question around revoking offers, almost 3% have said that they are revoking some kind of offer, whether it's for internships or full-time. But when we isolate that and just say how many for full-time, it's a very low number. It's only 0.3. So of those 2020 grads that you've given an offer to, are you revoking them? Very few are actually doing that. And about 15% of those that are revoking offers are doing it just for the internships. So that's interesting. And then when you look at the actual internships, almost 40% of employers are reducing the length of the internships. And they're doing that by delaying the start date. So we're going to find the interns are starting later into the summer, and that's about 40%. Moving virtually, it's close to 43% are planning to move virtually. And then 22% haven't made any changes at all yet. So 22% haven't made any changes. The last thing I'd like to just focus attention on are expectations for how you're going to participate, or employers will participate on campus in the fall for career fairs. And so far, 56%, almost 57% have said that they will participate in on-campus and virtual career fairs. 12% have said they will do on-campus but not virtual. That's interesting. Almost 7% said that they will do virtual but no on-campus. And we have almost 4% who said that they will not be attending college career fairs at all. So hopefully this lays a little bit of groundwork for us as we're thinking about this go forward, the summer, the fall. What I'd like to do now is to talk with our panelists around that planning. There are a lot of things that could happen. The world is still changing. So I know that there are a number of perspectives and a lot of bets that are being placed in terms of what will happen in various localities based upon where the world is. So will we still be in a more or less a quarantine state where people are stay at home? Will it be some kind of hybrid situation where some localities are in a stay at home, some are not? Will schools be in session in person? Will some be virtual? Will that happen in some combination of ways? So there's a lot that could happen. And I'd be really interested, and I know our audience would too, in hearing from you all about how you're doing that planning, how you're thinking through it, and what the likely scenarios are for you in terms of how you plan to engage both with students and with candidates in the short term. So why don't we start with Dan? Dan, love to hear your perspective on this.
Sure, and thanks, Sean, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And like many other people that I've spoken to, my counterparts, both on the employer side and on the college side, it's hope for the best and plan for something else. And so I think while the the current crisis, came upon us very quickly. Having the wherewithal to now think more thoughtfully around various scenarios going forward is something we're spending a lot of time on. So to be specific, certainly shoring up our technological capabilities, and that goes beyond just video interviewing, but our ways of interacting with students. So we were fortunate at EY, where I work, we had a lot of good tech in place. We had been doing pre-recorded interviews. We've been doing some online assessments and communications, but shoring that up to prepare for what is likely going to be, or what could be, a broader number of people that we will need to either assess or communicate with or interview and come the fall. For us and for many in my industry, the spring is a lighter time for pure interviewing. There's still some branding that goes on, et cetera, but we want to make sure that we have capacity. And I'm not just talking about bandwidth, I'm talking about the right people involved, the right tools, the right technology, so that come the fall, if it is more of what we're experiencing, more of the same, we're ready for that. Two other things that we're planning for specifically. One is continuing to go deep on alternative sourcing. And this is something, again, that we had started doing a while back at EY, in addition to being on campus. That's in addition, and we will continue to go to campus either virtually or in person. But we actually have a campus sourcing team, similar to what we have on our executive and our lateral hiring teams, that go out and are able to source candidates in other ways. So think of your LinkedIn and similar platforms like that for searching. So recruiter licenses and the like, but also others that are more specific to students. So many of you work with Simplicity, work with Handshake, Way Up. There's a few of these resources that we now have a dedicated team. And in addition to being able to source without physically being in front of someone, about 10% of our hires this year came from students that came from sources we don't physically visit. I anticipate that number will go up. It also is giving us broader exposure from a diversity standpoint, a wider array of students from a wider array of sources. And then last but not least, I think it's determining how we want to be presented in the market. So we're always focused on our employee value proposition, what we have to offer for students. But in addition to that, I think it's important to highlight what it is that how the organization has responded to the crisis, how it's going to continue to respond, because everyone that I talk to says, the new normal, I don't love that term, but what's coming next on the other side of this will not look like what was before. And what are the things that your organization either has in place or is putting in place that is a benefit to employees and potential employees? I think talking about that more holistically and more directly is something we're doing a lot of planning about. And I think it's really smart to think that far ahead in the planning. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, Sean, I didn't want to go too long.
We can't hear you, Sean.
Yeah, Sean, you're on mute.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
There we go.
Sorry. Oh my
Yay.
God.
Hey!
Hey, I'm back. I'm back, everybody. I know that was perfect. Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate that information. And I'd like to now ask Suzanne if you could share with us kind of how you're going about your planning and strategy.
Sure, happy to. And thank you for this opportunity to be with you all today. I hope everybody's loved ones are well and safe. But, I think going back to what Sean started off by saying, there's many different scenarios. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of rumors going around campus about what's going to happen. And I mean, the truth is nobody really knows right now. But I think we can say with great certainty that, of course, this fall isn't going to look like last fall. And I also don't think it's going to be just a continuation of what we've started this spring. I think students are going to come with heightened expectations. Employers are going to have different needs. So that means these summer months that career services, we typically, do some retreats, do some adjustments to our services. No, the magnitude of this crisis means we're going to be making sweeping changes. And things are going to be different. So, and also, unfortunately, I think all of our budget pictures are going to look a little different and probably not for the better. So having laid all of that on you, I know it's really overwhelming. I mean, we're just getting through spring. To even start to think about fall is daunting. So to help out a little bit, when you're planning, when you're thinking ahead, think back to those things that aren't changing. So what is your mission? What are your core values? What is that student-centered approach you're still going to take? You know, you put those things in place for uncertain times, and now is the time to really go back to your foundations. And I'd also say, as you're looking forward, reflect on this spring. There's definitely been some silver linings. If you've come up with new and meaningful ways to interact with your staff, how can you carry those forward and grow those? And I think in career services, we can all agree we've never adopted new technology at such a pace before. So, you know, in the midst of all of this change, we can have some solid footing, and we've learned a lot, and the fall is going to present more opportunities to learn. So kind of with that context, what we're going to do at my institution at UC Irvine is come up with a plan. And again, going back to Sean's introduction, we're going to be looking at 3 different scenarios. So if things go back to quote unquote normal, students come back. The other extreme, if they don't come back in the fall. And then the third is somewhere in the middle. So we've got those 3 scenarios. Then we're going to talk about, for each of those scenarios, what could the best possible version of our fall look like? Okay, and so we'll set that vision. And then from that vision, we'll go through about, I've come up with about 7 areas of guiding questions to help us come up with specific tactics and strategies to achieve those visions. And so what I would engage my staff in is conversations around our staff. So, you know, do roles need to shift? Do we need different professional development? How will productivity be measured? And I just want to pause there and say, we cannot compare this coming fall to past falls. It's going to be apples to oranges. People are living through a pandemic. It's just not realistic. So, I mean, while you want to be gathering real-time data to shift and pivot, you also want to be thinking about asking the people who come to you for help, why did you come here? And did you get what you needed? And then looking at those gaps to pivot and learn. Other areas that we'll be talking about to come up with our plan are your employers. And I know we've got some questions coming up on that, so I'll hold off on that. Your staff, I mean, your students, obviously, and we're going to talk about that as well, but I just wanted to put out there that something we're definitely thinking about, we've already thought about, is what can we do beyond the webinar? Okay, we're all on this webinar now. We've probably been on 5 already today. And think about our students taking all of their classes online. What are self-service ways that we can engage them? What are real-time, more like Ask Me Anything, Instagram Live ways that we can engage them? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have our scenarios, our visions, and then come up with tactics and strategies around students, employers, partners, revenue generation, and I know I've left something out. Well, I think around marketing and technology, and I'll leave it at there because I know we're going to have a lot of more discussion where we can dive deeper into those things.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. Really appreciate that overview. And I'd love to hear from CJ, if you could talk to us about what you're seeing at your company and how you're going about your planning.
Sure, Sean, I'd be happy to do that. And I just want to kind of touch back on what Suzanne said and commend the universities for turning around their structure so quickly with using the technology, because I've worked on different campuses, I've recruited different campuses through different employers, and I'm telling you, it has been, I don't even have a word for it, how fast that they've been able to accommodate this new situation that we're in. So speaking of Luminix, let's go back to where I'm at, my little area in Austin, Texas. We're a small biotechnology company. We're one of the companies that is manufacturing one of the tests for COVID-19. So we're still hiring, okay? Now, what that looks like is we're doing a lot of temp assignments, limited assignments for anyone, whether they're in college or not. But one thing that we did do, and I'll come back to the planning part, but we saw we had a need, and we figured that we would be behind the curve on the whole recruiting for interns. So we reached out to our former interns last summer, and we said, hey, we know you're home. If you're available and would like to work, we'd like to put you to work. And so we, out of the 10 that we reached out to, 5 were available. And so we got them on board, and we had to do it a little different. But somebody would say, well, why didn't you just make a post, right? Well, one thing is we didn't know what our interviewing process was going to be. So we were still trying to learn how we're going to do this. You know, we do virtual interviews, which is something that we don't commonly do. So just like the career services teams have had to learn, we've had to learn. I've had to train my team on a new process. You know, we do the phone screen, then we do the interviewing screen. So reaching back to our interns was easy because we've already met them, we know them. It was a matter of how do we get technology to them? And so once we figured that out, we took care of that. So now to this day point, you're like, okay, what are you going to do this summer? I have no idea. We're taking it quarter by quarter, to be honest. We're a small shop. We're about 1,100 employees worldwide. And we didn't anticipate something this magnitude. The focus really has been making sure my manufacturing team is staffed up. And so what we did do in that area with the temporary limited assignments, we reached out to the Austin community. We reached out to our Luminix employees and said, hey, do you have any college students at home? Anybody that's been out of place of work, would they like to come and help us put these tests together? And so we filled about 13 or 15 positions within 3 days, reaching out to our community. And so moving forward, that's a new recruiting strategy for us. We had not done something like that before, but we had so many positions to fill in such a short amount of time. So I think as after this webinar, we will be taking a look in May on how we will be moving forward in the fall. But we are still posting all of our open opportunities at all our different locations on our career site. But when it comes to doing internship hires, college hires, we're going to have to revisit how we do it, and at the same time, how will we be interviewing? So that's kind of where we are, Sean, at this point in time.
Very helpful. Thank you. I love all the different perspectives in the employment world and how it's rolling itself out. Gihan, would you like to share with us kind of what your thinking is, your latest?
Sure. Thank you for having me on. And I feel really good to be in such a large group of colleagues who are struggling with all of the same issues I think that we all are, right? And I want to say up front, like, all our institutions have some differences among ourselves, even just on the school side. So Suzanne is at a public university that is on the larger side. American University is about 7,000 undergraduates and 5,000 graduate students, private institution in Washington, DC. So a lot of differences among ourselves, but there are also commonalities in the themes that I've heard other panelists respond to this question, right? What are we thinking about? So just like all of you all, looking into the fall, we're doing a lot of scenario planning, right? Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. And so we are planning for a variety of different scenarios. That's kind of difficult, I think, for a lot of my staff, and for myself, frankly, like just to have that level of uncertainty is anxiety provoking. And you have to kind of keep a lot of different thoughts and balls in the air, particularly when one thing can affect another thing. One of the things I have tried to do is to be, as the leader of the office, and I would recommend this to everybody else who is a leader of a team, is to have channels of communication with your broader organization's leadership, where you are able to get a better idea of where that thinking is going And then that allows me to pass that back to my team, and that's helpful for thinking through. So I'll give you a specific example. Right now, I sit in a larger senior administrator meeting that meets 3 times a week, every week. We started out doing it daily, and then as we got more engaged, we've gone to the 3 days a week. And from that, I'm gathering, as we're doing this scenario planning, that there are a lot of sort of baseline issues that a university like ours, and I'm guessing most others out there, are thinking about. And there were 2 things that came up as sort of guiding principles, if you like. So one was return on investment, right? How are students going to continue to see value in the education in whatever form it's being delivered? And then the second is sort of care and engagement of our students, right? That those are sort of baseline values. I would also add a third, which is inclusion and equity in the services that we provide to our students, and the learning and the service opportunities that we offer our students. And those are baseline guiding principles that I have been able to take and use very much in the work that we're doing as we plan forward for the fall. So let me talk a little bit about inclusion in particular, which was kind of at a baseline what we were thinking about. There were 2 sort of populations, if you like, that I was particularly concerned about in terms of equity. And the first is our students with the highest needs, right? Because they're immediately impacted. Many of them now have even more exacerbated situations from having parents who've been laid off, or et cetera, maybe have less access to a private space where they can conduct their online learning, right? I was taking that kind of for granted, that, oh yeah, of course you go to your bedroom and you shut the door. So they may not have their own bedroom where they can shut the door, and they might not have access to high bandwidth Wi-Fi, right? Or there might be 2 computers among 4 children, and and so on, that need to be used. So these were all issues that were front and center for us as we were thinking about kind of how do we provide services going forward. And among the things that my team has done is look at getting ourselves better educated on a variety of the things that might be helpful in this way. So we have partnered very heavily. Like, my financial aid office is like sick of me bugging them, with questions about how things work and how are the allocations made for federal work study monies, right? So that we can try to protect those kinds of allocations and make sure that our students have as many of those resources as possible going into the fall. The other set of students that I had some concern about was our students with disabilities, who might have issues with accessing the technology that we're all now using, right, in a fully equitable way, and so that they are able to get the same experience. So how are you going to engage in a virtual job fair if you have a hearing disability or are deaf, and you typically use have somebody who is signing for you, right, at your side, and is acting as a sign language translator for you? How does that work in that context, right? And so we don't have all those answers, but I think it's really important to know that we're trying to think forward on those questions as we go forward into the fall. I'll leave it there for now. And then perhaps we can come back to that idea of inclusion and equity and how we're thinking about those guiding principles broadly.
Great, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists for this helpful starting point. And we've been getting lots of questions through the chat. So I'm gonna try and capture some of them have come through. Many of them have been answered as we go along, so I appreciate the panelists being willing to answer those questions as we go through. One of the questions that there's been quite a bit, and this is for, I'd love to hear our employer responses to this, CJ and Dan, around internships that are rescinded. And so students have internships that have been rescinded, and the question is around, is it okay for them to still list it on, should they list it on their resume? Is it okay for them? Would it be a good thing to have it listed? So they had this experience lined up, they can't do it anymore. What is your recommendation in terms of that resume process? How would you look at that in the future as an employer?
If Dan doesn't mind, I'll go first. And
Go ahead.
I think Monica Thompson gave a response in the chat. I wouldn't list it because I just want to see what has been completed. I'd rather see a student list volunteer work at Habitat for Humanity versus an internship that was rescinded. I mean, I'd like to see what they've been doing during this time of COVID-19. Have they taken any online classes? Have they become an expert in Zoom? Something that's factual and something I can measure. Getting an offer and rescinded, it doesn't really tell me anything. It just tells me that, you know, maybe Dan was thinking about hiring them or her and nothing happened. But it's right this stage in the game, I think it's not that important from my side of the fence. Okay. Dan,
you know,
what you think?
I would offer you know, a slightly different take, which is I first of all fully agree that whatever you're doing to keep yourself meaningfully learning, volunteering, those kinds of things. But I actually think there's some value, at least for me, if I know, for example, that someone was offered an opportunity and accepted, you know, like this is not like, hey, I went through and I got an offer. This was, they were all set to start and then COVID got in the way. Similar to what I encourage students to do, like that's good information for me. I tell students, you know, in there, if their GPA might be a little bit lower, I say, put right in there in like bold italics, you know, working 40 hours while getting a full-time education, because that explains to me why the GPA might be a little different, in the same way that saying, hey, had an offer but got it taken away due to the crisis, explains to me they went through all of that grueling interview process that we put your poor students through. They got the offer, they accepted, they committed, they were all set to go. And then something got, you know, and here's what happened. So I agree that the next step needs to say, what are you doing now? But I think that actually does tell part of the story, as long as it's just like a call out, not like a whole section of a CV or resume.
Right. And I'm fine with that. But to have it listed as like an item within your work experience, I probably, it wouldn't do me a lot of help. But if you just want to mention it in a cover letter or even in a conversation that we have on the phone interview, I think that's fine.
I would just say the only thing is for, and again, like, this is difference in size, right? Like for an
Yeah,
employer like us, I don't get to see the cover letter that often. Usually my recruiters go straight to that resume. So I think a line somewhere in the work experience section at the top, because it's going to be the most current, saying here's what happened, and then listing out actual experiences, because then I don't have to worry about missing it in the cover letter, which I'll tell you, we don't get to see a lot of them, or even if we get them, we don't go through a lot of them, or a conversation you might not get to if I didn't see your resume. So, but again, that's with the volume I'm dealing with. That's would be my preference. Or I think, you know, but I think there's lots of ways to kind of skin this cat.
Oh,
yeah, I think
agree.
that's what's really important here, right? And this is so much in the one size doesn't fit all. So whether it's, you know, in the university environments, in the employment sector, that based upon the industry you're in, based upon the type of employer that you are, there's going to be a little bit different of an answer that you're going to get along the way with these kinds of questions. We had a question early on also around international students. I don't know if any of you have been thinking through issues related to international students, but any perspectives that you have around complications with work authorization issues, et cetera, just based upon the current environment we're in and the kinds of things that you're thinking through or that you might be doing. Is there anyone who's had experience or just been thinking through this?
No.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
Maybe I can just jump in and say, this is another of those populations that is very, very affected. I think even in pre-COVID, like PC days, right? International students, and I'm very empathetic on this issue because I was one when I went through college. right? And also for my law school experience. Throughout my education, I was an international student, and then I was fortunate to have gone through the green card process and now be a citizen of the United States. These students have always had a harder time in terms of the various barriers that exist. Some employers will not even look at them just at a baseline, just because you're not authorized to work on an ongoing basis, right? And in these times in which we're living, there are a variety of additional complications, and that's just the truth. I think we just sort of need to acknowledge that it's not only the political environment, but just COVID itself has made, many students are unable to return home, or they are now returned home and they can't come back, or they will have additional visa issues, and doing online classes and online work may have implications for your visa status, right? And you have to get authorizations for all those things. So anyway, all I'll say is that it is pretty darn tough for our international student population as far as work, I think, pieces go.
Yeah. Suzanne, did you have something to add?
Well, of course, I agree with everything Gihan said. So I think, what we're looking to do is provide, and we've always done this, but I think we're going to pay more attention to it, is work with faculty to provide more project-based learning projects in their courses, so that students, no matter what their status is, can gain some applied experience and workplace experience. And we're also increasing our engagement with our campus entrepreneur center. They work with many startups. These startups aren't necessarily established. Not in a position to pay. So we're working with our entrepreneur center for them to be the host of an internship site that provides a lot of training. And as part of this umbrella internship, gives students access to work with or have exposure to these startups. And we see that as another avenue for giving access to workplace experience, no matter what your status is. So we're trying to look at some new avenues for that.
Fantastic. Another one of the questions that is always a popular one that's been coming around is relates to technology. Several of you mentioned technology, Suzanne, Dan, and others, that you're looking at new technologies, or you're considering different kinds of things, or et cetera, et cetera. And so some of our attendees were just wondering about that, like, what are the kinds of things that you're looking at or that you're considering related technologies, and even specific platforms if you feel comfortable or not. So it's up to you. Suzanne, did you want to?
Sure. So I think like many folks across the country, we're exploring virtual career fair technologies. That's not something we've entered into before. And I've talked to many colleagues across the country, and a lot of us are piloting something this spring, but maybe as part of a consortium. So we can learn from that and then go through a more careful, deliberate thinking process this summer to really launch those the best way in the fall. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at ways to engage students beyond the webinar. So it's either at the end of this week or next week, we're going to start having a live chat function on our website. So students and employers can just drop by for quick questions. And we also started last week Instagram Ask Me Anything sessions with our counseling staff. And we would love to invite employers to do like Instagram takeovers with us as well. And we're already fortunate in that we have some self-service technologies, such as an online interview practice platform. And we also have a AI-powered resume review tool. So we're really trying to give students instant access to the services they need, where they don't feel like they have to set aside a half an hour or an hour to join us for a webinar. So
yeah, helpful. Dan.
Yeah, so we'll be utilizing some of the tools I had put in the chat. MS Teams has been really successful for us because well, it's very reliable. You can actually, it's kind of like almost like a Google Classroom, a Google platform where you can, Google Docs, where you can share documents in real time and update in real time. So that's what we've been using. We will bring interns into that. And full-time hires into that platform. So that's been great. We still use, HireVue for video. Someone asked about the AI. We don't use the facial or voice recognition with that, but we use that for a lot of our video stuff. Clearly Zoom, we're all very familiar with. One thing I will say, because there's some related questions, is how do you turn an internship, a live internship, into a virtual? And my answer is that you don't. Is that you can't say this is what it looked like when everyone was coming, when we had 3,000 interns coming into our offices in the US. The answer is you make it a different kind of experience that you can have that can still be meaningful via virtual. So for us, that's a modular approach that includes, we will have client work for sure. And a lot of our client serving tools are behind our firewall. So that addresses any of the privacy and security concerns. We will have some online learning, of course, that will be a bigger proportion, online and virtual onboarding, networking, and those kinds of things. But we felt it was important to still include a portion, and we're shooting for 2 to 3 weeks of our 5-week program will be, service line specific work, client work, teamwork, et cetera, just so that our interns can get a sense. Now, and I put this in the chat, we're very lucky to be able to still offer that, in that our industry, we have a lot of our clients that are still need us for their audits, for their tax work, the CARES Act, transformation, restructuring, all of those things. So I have seen a number of my counterparts at other more directly impacted industries that are moving to either a 1 or 2 day or a 1 week, more of a learning type experience for what was going to be instead of their full internship. And a lot of that is because of necessity. They're doing that to still provide an experience while being in an industry that is disproportionately affected.
Super. Hey, CJ, I was wondering, the hiring that you're doing, you had mentioned earlier, you're hiring, you are hiring, and they might not be, you have some interns, but the bulk of it is not that. They are these more temporary positions, and they're college educated folks, et cetera, et cetera. And so are these positions going virtual? And if so, are you making changes with those, or are they going into work, and how are you handling that transition for those folks?
Right. I'm gonna piggyback off of Dan, and he's absolutely right. We're delivering a different experience because we're in a different time, and our interns, they are virtual. They're pretty much working in our research and development business unit. The temporary assignments are in our manufacturing quality assurance area. And what we had to do there is divvy up how we practice social distancing. So they're coming in to work, but instead of maybe having, a lab with 6 people on the row, we have maybe 2 people on the row, and they're 6 feet apart, right? They're all wearing masks. So we are definitely taking the safety precautions, but majority of those roles are on site because we are a medical device manufacturing company, and we're putting together the COVID-19 tests, and we need people on site just as much as we need people working from home in different remote locations.
Great, thank you so much.
No problem.
There is a question I'd like to throw at Gihan and Suzanne, and this has to do with revenue sources. So there was a question around, I traditionally relied on things like, let's say, in-person career fairs as a substantial revenue source for my operation. How are you thinking through that now? Are you thinking of alternatives, et cetera, et cetera? Gihan, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer on this. I think, as Suzanne referenced earlier, all of us are fully anticipating that we're going to need to tighten belts, right? So we're already looking at our budgets and thinking about where can we preserve kind of really the most essential core functions, and where are the things that maybe we could have let go of a while ago and we're just doing them because we always did them, right? That way. Suzanne was highlighting kind of, we have an increased need for professional development, not a decreased need for professional development for our staff in these changing times. And many people might think, oh, yeah, that's an easy cut. Like, right, let's just cut all the conferences and so on. There will be some savings if we continue to be remote, right? So we're not paying for the flights to travel to wherever and the hotel costs of being wherever. And there might be opportunities like, NACE is a great example of offering a whole series of online webinars from well before COVID, right? Where you can, in a very cost-effective way, continue to educate your staff on those kinds of things. But I think the bottom line reality is that we have to all be looking at how can we save money, and because I have not found a magic pot of gold, somewhere that I've been able to tap into, and I'm not anticipating that that's going to be appearing on any of our horizons anytime soon. So the reality of it is that we've got to think about, how are we going to make this work? The other piece that is important is at a university level. Whenever, my university is one that has always valued its students' experiences and making sure that they have many opportunities for getting employed, which is, I think, the case with many of our colleagues who are on this. And so kind of advocating as a leader within my office with my superiors for funding for essential functions that will support our students is one of the key things that I see as part of my job. I've said to my staff, like, I expect you to come up with every idea that you can. Like, we're throwing out the book kind of right now, and I want you to be as creative and positive as possible, and don't worry about the budget pieces, right? Like, if it's going to cost money, like, maybe it'll have a price tag. I don't want that to constrain your thinking in terms of how you move forward. It's my job then to take those good ideas that I think are really worthwhile and sell them to somebody above me. And sometimes it'll work, and mostly it probably won't, frankly. But we need to be seen also as, like, that's part of us showing our value. It's like, we're having all these thoughts and ideas, and here's a menu of things for you to consider at a higher level. And which ones of these are we going to be able to support, right, at the university?
Super. Suzanne, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, really well said. I guess I would add to that a little bit more about, brainstorming around alternative revenue generation ideas. Yeah, I haven't found that magic pot of gold either, but we're looking at what value can we add for employers at this time as they've been shifting to remote internships. How can we help them with that? We're also looking at a return to resume books. We hadn't done them for a long time because employers can go in on our platform Handshake and look for resumes, but we found that some employers would like us to do that work for them. So we're trying to be creative. Gihan, we're also trying to consider what programs to sunset for maybe for now, maybe forever. And those programs that involve travel might be taking a back seat right now. And then something else we think about in terms of budgeting and revenue, I know not all institutions have the ability to carry funds forward from year to year. Some of you are on a more of a zero-based budget, but for those of you who can, really showing what your plan is for those funds, why they're needed now and why they're needed to sustain you in the future. So that's something else to throw in the mix. And professional development, for me, it's more important than ever right now, and I'm going to do whatever I can to preserve it.
Very insightful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of chatter in the chat around virtual career fairs. So I would love to I'd love to start and then maybe hear just some reaction. I'm going to start with the employers, and then I'd love to hear some reaction from our college folks on to their responses and the kinds of things you're thinking through. But from an employer perspective, how do you want to participate in a virtual career? Will you, number one, and how would you prefer to interact in a virtual career fair? What are your expectations for it? What would make it worth your while? Dan, do you want to start?
Yeah, and it's interesting because Sean and I had this conversation, one of our bald brother chats, and yeah. So the way that I'm encouraging my teams to approach this is similar to the live career fairs, which again, there's been lots of conversation on the value thereof, right, over time, which is, one size does not fit all. Not all career fairs, whether they be virtual or live, are created equal. So at the end of the day, what's the value as an employer? What's the value that career fair will provide to me? I know the value to the school, and that's bringing employers and in many cases a revenue stream. I know the value to the students and that they having exposure, but the value to the employer. And so our very best university partners are the ones that say, hey, if we can serve you more of the students you're looking for, less of the ones that you're not, right? So maybe it's a tailored career fair for my industry or for a specific type of student that I'm looking for in terms of background. That's one way to do it. Maybe it's a smaller forum so that we're not getting lost among hundreds and hundreds of employers. And I know there, arguments in the past have been, well, it's a lot easier to bring everyone together, have one big career fair, get it all set up, et cetera. But maybe in this virtual environment, it's a little easier to set up smaller, more targeted virtual career fairs. And I'm not saying that's the only answer, but having a conversation with your employer partners is something that I know my teams on the ground would appreciate, to say, what is it that would be a good spend of time and money, frankly, right? So in the chat, can you still charge for a virtual career fair? I think if there's value to it in putting us in front of students, frankly, in the only way that is going to be available to us if we don't see a return to normal come the fall, I think having those conversations and being willing to be more targeted to the extent that that's again practical, and I think virtually it is a bit more practical. I think that's the smart way to start. Honestly,
great. CJ, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I mean, I think it comes back down to value. For us, Luminix, we at this time may not, because of the roles that we're recruiting for. So if I had more, or I knew more direct hire permanent roles were coming, more than likely I would be teaming up with my partners as well and saying, hey, this is kind of what we need at this moment. Is there any way possible we could collaborate? Now, one thing I am doing, and it doesn't matter, the school, is that I am trying to keep our employer brand out there, even though we still don't know what our numbers are going to be next quarter, right? But I am participating, helping students with, what do I do on my resume? What do I do in LinkedIn? What skills are important right now? I still have a passion to help those individuals get hired, regardless. That's just a CJism. I don't care who I work for, right? Because at the end of the day, this is bad, but not as bad as everybody thinks. Dan made a very good point. His industry is still hiring. Biotech is still hiring. There's a lot of places that are still hiring, and I don't want to see students panic because of fear. If you're a liberal arts student, we can still make it happen. It's just the way you present yourself. What are you saying in your resume? What are you saying on your LinkedIn page? If you're engineering, still, there are companies out there that are hiring. So if we don't participate in a career fair, I'm still going to participate in partnering with my partners to help them let their students know that you still can become a very attractive potential candidate.
Super, great advice. Gihan, do you have anything to add on this virtual career fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan said very well, kind of like the different platforms have like all kinds of different characteristics, and they're not all created equal. We are learning very quickly, just like everybody else probably who has not done one of these before, kind of how they work, what they are. We moved our, what was going to be our regular spring job fair, which was supposed to happen on April 8th. We are now conducting it on May 15th. And we, in very fast order, were able to get a contract with Career Eco is the platform that we are going to be using. And I think that's one of several that are out there that are potential platforms. And I would also agree with what several of you have articulated, which is this idea that it's not just like one modality. Like, we're not just putting all our eggs in that virtual career fair basket, right? So we have tried to move as many of our employer engagement opportunities for students online. So one-on-ones, info sessions, virtual networking with an employer that'll happen. Kind of, we have a program that we call employer in residence, which is one-on-one informational meetings with students as they sign up, right? Almost all of our employers have continued to do those virtually, right, on an ongoing basis as a great way to stay engaged. And we primarily have our most significant employers who are desired by our students participate in that. So kind of offering all these different modalities, I think, of ways for our students to continue to meet with employers and engage with employers has been really important, and we learned those lessons very quickly. One last thing I'll say is that in terms of student engagement, I put a note in the chat about this. We are really seeing that students are responding much more to things that they perceive of as leading directly to something, right? So like, while our career advising appointments loads are down from where they would have been at this time last year, all our employer engagement opportunities, like the employer in residence program and so on, are way up. Like, everybody wants those kinds of, so more instrumental kinds of things are what students are craving, is my sense.
Great. Hey, Suzanne, since we're almost at the end here, I was just going to pivot a little bit maybe away from this and just ask you if there are any additional words of wisdom that you'd like to give to this group as you've heard this conversation, anything you'd like to add or comment on?
Yes. I think at the beginning of this session, Dan had shared the wisdom of I think it's plan for the worst and hope for something else.
No. Hope for the best and plan for something.
Wait, yeah. I guess I'm thinking, as we're in this unprecedented situation, I'm thinking of plan for the possibilities and pivot and pilot to the best. So I think we all just need to be really prepared to be more flexible and adaptable than we ever have before, and also be forgiving and understand that we are not simply working from home, we're working through a pandemic, and we're going to get through this, and all of these great things that we're doing, we're learning from them, and they are going to outlive this pandemic and serve us really well.
Very well said. Thank you, Suzanne. We're just about at the end here. A few pointers. The session has been recorded and will be posted on the NACE Web website under our recent COVID resources page. And I should mention, someone just posted, I'm going to also post the link right now. Suzanne actually did, I just posted it, a blog today, which outlines many of the things that she outlined today, and it's an excellent blog, and I hope you will go and check that out. I think you'll find it to be really helpful. There are a lot of other resources on the NACE Web website under the COVID resources. Please check those out. Check back to the quick poll results. We're publishing those each and every Friday, so you can see the latest and greatest in terms of what's happening in the world. I hope you'll join us next week for our last and final in the series of these town hall meetings, where we'll be talking a little bit more about the future and what it holds and some specific issues related to that. So I hope you'll join us. Thank you, panelists. You did an amazing job. It was great to interact with you. Wonderful conversation. And to all those that attended, thank you for your really thoughtful questions and for interacting with us. We really appreciate it, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Sean. Well done.
This concludes today's event. The archive will be available within 3 business days. Thank you again for attending, and thank you to our sponsor, HireVue.